Syracuse football started the season 6-0 for the first time since 1987, but in the past 2 weeks, it has been a different story.
Two opponents that we just played were extremely physical, which we all knew was going to happen before the season started. Obviously, some of that stuff has taken the toll.
With losses to Clemson and Notre Dame, the Cuse finds itself in unfamiliar territory. That's right, a losing streak. SU can flip the script this weekend, though, with a road matchup against Pitt. We'll tell you everything you need to know about the Orange and the Panthers on Cuse Countdown, which starts right now. We're back. Welcome into the CitrusTV studio for Cuse Countdown. Alongside Ethan Frank and Ian Nicholas, I'm Ben Spector, previewing Syracuse's upcoming matchup with Pitt. But the Orange at this point are in a rare spot for the 2022 season. SU is losers of 2 straight, with a 27-21 loss to Clemson 2 weeks ago and a 41-24 domination put on by Notre Dame. Against the Tigers, the Orange led up 450 total yards of offense. And last weekend, Notre Dame posted just over 360 yards of offense. The once #1 scoring defense in the ACC is no longer playing that way, which may pose a problem with the upcoming schedule. But it isn't only the defense. Garrett Schrader left last week's contest against Notre Dame at the end of the first half due to injury. Carlos Del Rio Wilson replaced the Mississippi State transfer and threw for 190 yards and a touchdown. So Ethan, Dino Babers hasn't committed to a quarterback for this Saturday's matchup against Pitt, but what can Syracuse fans expect from the offense if Schrader can't go?
Well, you just got to look at what Carlos Del Rio Wilson did against Notre Dame, Ben, and that was throw the ball down the field, move outside the pocket, try to pick up first downs with his legs. It's all the things Garrett Schrader does, just on a different level. We were talking about it earlier. He throws a little bit of a different ball than Garrett Schrader does. A little bit more zip on it, a little bit of a more natural throw of the football. It's just a different game plan with a different guy under center.
100%, but at the same time, you were talking about it. He's a big guy with a big arm, and he's really mobile. Have we heard those words before? Yes, we have. Carlos Del Rio Wilson has all the tools to not only run the Robert and I offense well, but really make a statement on the road if he's thrust into action.
Guys, even with the quarterback situation, you look at Syracuse's season so far, and you may deem it a success. For the first time since 2018, SU finds itself bowl eligible. But if you look at the past 2 weeks, one thing becomes clear. There is a talent deficiency between the top programs in the country and the Orange. Take a look at this play from 2 weeks ago where SU's defensive line, with an average weight of 250 pounds, has no answer for Clemson running back Will Shipley, who, by the way, was a 5-star recruit. Then you look at the first play against Notre Dame, a throw Garrett Schrader wants back. Former first-team All-American at Northwestern, Brandon Joseph reads the field and runs it back. Then finally, later in that Notre Dame game, Audric Estime, a 4-star recruit, is completely untouched and dashes in for a score. Now, what was a recurring pattern here? Clemson and Notre Dame are examples of teams filled with high-flying talent. On the other hand, Syracuse's current roster has 0 5-stars. And when you look at the gauntlet of ACC opponents ahead, life could get tougher. So Ethan, Ian, how will this lack of firepower affect Syracuse going forward?
Well, honestly, I think Syracuse has plenty of stars. The problem is plenty of them are injured. But seriously, Sean Tucker, 2 former 4-star recruits at quarterback, Arondé Gadsden out wide, Michael Jones in the middle of his defense. I get it. Maybe they weren't billed as stars heading into the year, but there's a reason why Syracuse started 6-0. Guys stepped up and took their game to another level, and a lot of those guys are still in place.
Yeah, I understand that, Ian, but you named, what, 7 or 8 guys? How many guys typically play in a single football game? I got some numbers for you. Let me read you Syracuse's recruiting classes according to 24/7 Sports since Dino Babers took over. Starting in 2017, 53rd, 51st, 56th, 62nd, 62nd, 65th. You sense a trend? It's getting worse, and it's not that good to begin with. The lack of depth on this team in terms of talent is really, really bad, and that's why Syracuse is struggling against the Clemsons and the Notre Dames of the world.
I love when Ethan Frank brings out the numbers. The statistician in him is off the charts, but if you look at Syracuse, it took a big hit. Former All-American Garrett Williams tore his ACL, and he's out for the season. The redshirt freshman has been the #1 cornerback on the depth chart, and Dino Babers says that it will be a group effort in order to replace him.
sometimes when you lose one bona fide starter like that, sometimes it's not just one guy stepping up. Sometimes it's a rotation type thing between people based off of maybe what an offense is trying to do to you or what point of the game it is. So we're going to have to wait and see how that rotation goes.
The rotation might have a lot of depth, but Ethan, do you agree with Dino Babers here? Can a rotation replace Garrett Williams?
It's going to have to, Ben, because are you trusting Isaiah Johnson to go out there and play one-on-one coverage? I'm certainly not. Deuce Chestnut's going to have to do a lot of stepping on the outside his own right. But you look at the safeties on this team, there are a bunch of them. Elijah Clark, Justin Barron, Jason Simmons, Jahad Carter, Rob Hanna, among other guys. There are just a lot of different options in the secondary, like Dino said. He mentioned they got a lot of good cats back there. Well, you're going up against a really good Panthers team, you're going to need some animals to match them.
I think Isaiah Johnson is an animal. Look, Garrett Williams has played pretty much zero football over the last 3 weeks, and now he's not going to play any football for the rest of his season. And yes, a former All-American, a really talented guy. But so is Isaiah Johnson. I get it. The Ivy League doesn't scream fantastic, but he's got the size, and he's put a good product on the field over the last 3 weeks. Nobody's been able to pass the ball against Syracuse over the last 3 weeks. It's because they know they have solid depth at the position. I really like what Isaiah Johnson can do.
Isaiah Johnson could do great things. Jason Simmons Jr. leads the team in pass breakups. Elijah Clark, 4-star transfer from Rutgers. Lots of options in the secondary, but the run defense has been struggling as of late. Syracuse gave up nearly 300 rushing yards against Clemson and nearly 250 last week in a matchup with Notre Dame. Ethan, how have teams recently been able to expose the SU front seven?
Ben, Syracuse's run defense has been a big reason why the Orange have dropped their first 2 games of the season and plays against Clemson and Notre Dame. Teams that rushed for over 150 yards against SU are a big reason why. Let's take a look at a couple of those plays that prove the difference. Here, Syracuse has 6 men in the box against Clemson's 5-man front, and it's a read option between Cade Klubnik, the quarterback, Will Shipley, the running back. Derek McDonald is the man to read here. Shipley's able to take the handoff after McDonald overcommits to Klubnik, bursts right through the hole, breaks out of McDonald's arm tackle, and then from there, he just has 1 man to miss on his way to the house for a 50-yard touchdown. That gave Clemson the lead, a lead it did not relinquish the entire game, giving the Orange their first loss of the entire season just a couple of weeks ago. And then against Notre Dame last week, it was more of the same. Audric Estime led a 3-man backfield at tailback, and he was really, really good, giving bruises. You got 8 men up front here for the Irish, blocking just 7 Orange defenders, and then Estime just has to make 1 man miss. Elijah Clark in the hole. He levels the boom on him and then bursts down the left sideline, setting up another Notre Dame scoring the drive that sealed the deal in this one with under 4 minutes to go, giving SU its 2nd straight loss. So the Syracuse run defense really has to pick it up, and they have a tough task at hand with Israel Abanikanda on Saturday.
A tough task ahead indeed, but I've seen enough numbers about the run defense, and I know I said Ethan Frank, I love when he's a statistician. I also love it when Ian puts the numbers in front of him, so we're going to go by the numbers, and the first one to unpack is 4. The receivers for the Orange had 4 drops last week against the Irish, 1 from Devon Cooper, 1 from Umari Hatcher, and 2 from the leading receiver in Arande Gadsden. Ian, it was truly a tough day for the SU pass catchers.
Ben, it would be a tough day for any group of pass catchers if you lose your quarterback at halftime. And not only lose your quarterback, but like Ethan alluded to just a minute ago, a completely different thrower of the football. Del Rio Wilson has a cannon. He throws the ball at 100 miles an hour. And when Arande Gadsden has 2 drops, I'm going to guess it's an anomaly, and they're going to fix it if Del Rio Wilson has an opportunity to work with the guys in practice and get that chemistry down.
That sounds to me like you're making excuses, Ian. There are no excuses when the ball hits you in the hands. If it hits you in the hands, catch the football. Devon Cooper, 2 straight games now, he's dropped a first down on 3rd down and long on a well-thrown ball from either Garrett Schrader or Carlos Del Rio Wilson. And if you're Arande Gadsden and you want to prove that you're an all-ACC player, you can't drop 2 balls in this game. You can't.
Drops all over the place for the Syracuse receivers, but that was not the only position group on the offense that struggled. Sean Tucker in the run game, a preseason All-American, averaged just 3.8 yards per carry against the Irish. This comes after Tucker received only 5 carries in a battle with Clemson. Ethan, with potential for Schrader to be out against Pitt, Tucker might need to flip the script from last weekend and go into this weekend more confident.
Absolutely, Ben. And I think the reason he only averaged 3.8 yards per carry is because, one, Notre Dame was able to stack the box, and two, the threat of Garrett Schrader running was not there against Notre Dame because of the injuries he was dealing with. Against Clemson, Schrader was a very effective runner of the football. Against Notre Dame, that was not the case. You could clearly tell he was being bothered by something. When you have the dual threat in the backfield of either the quarterback keeping it or giving it to the running back, it makes it so much harder to predict from a defensive perspective. Against Notre Dame, that wasn't the case, and Notre Dame was able to key in on Tucker and limit him.
You know, Ethan, a lot of people are trying to think, how would Syracuse use Sean Tucker heading into this year? And yes, they've gotten him out in space more, they've used him in the pass game more, but he's just not that same animal that he was last season. Why? He's a north-south runner, explosive, run through you, in between the tackles. Robert Anae is getting too cute with how he's using number 34, and he's not very pleased on a weekly basis because of that. I think Robert Anae has to get back in the film room and realize what made Sean Tucker so special last year.
You sound like you're about to run through me.
I hope Sean Tucker does more of
Sean
that.
Tucker might have to. And I mean, if you look at the calendar, though, Sean Tucker, Robert and I, they can't be too cute because it's November. And in Dino Babers' career at Syracuse, the 11th month hasn't been too kind. The head coach has just 5 career victories in the month of November. And Ian, while Syracuse is already bowl eligible, there's some winnable games on the schedule.
There are definitely some winnable games, but Ethan, why hasn't Dino Babers been able to win these games? I'll tell you why. Dino is always talking about the fact that this part of the ACC, this division, is so difficult. And it's a division he always has to play in November, and they always prove him right. Because, again, even if a team like Pittsburgh or Florida State or Wake Forest have had some interesting losses this year, they're just more talented teams than Syracuse. You said it yourself, Ethan. They always find ways to bring in better guys. And they're still the same kind of program. I think Syracuse is really going to struggle over these next 3 games.
I'll add one thing. Dino Babers has not won a game in November since 2019. That's 3 years ago. It's time to break that streak.
Ethan, is that good? Real quick.
No, not good.
Yeah, not good. Well,
not good.
We're up against the break on Cuse Countdown. On the other side, we'll break down everything you need to know about the Pittsburgh Panthers. That and a whole lot more. Stay with us.
When I was in foster care, I never knew when I would have to move. So I always had my suitcase ready to go. Then one day, I was adopted. My new parents opened their hearts and home to me. My parents cook my favorite breakfast for me every morning. My parents take me on trips I never thought I would go on. They gave me a home and an even better reason to use that suitcase. My parents aren't perfect, but they're perfect for me.
Welcome back into Cuse Countdown alongside Ethan Frank and Ian Nicholas. I'm Ben Spector. We just talked a little bit about Syracuse, so now it's time to talk about Pitt. Last year, Pitt finished 11-3 and was the team in the ACC. Conference champions, leaders in the ACC in scoring offense, and a top 5 scoring defense in the conference. Quarterback Kenny Pickett was at the helm last year, and he was a Heisman finalist. This year, though, the tides have turned. The Panthers sit at just 4-4 and have a singular victory in the ACC. So, Ethan, Pickett leaves for the NFL, but what else has caused Pitt to have a different year than last?
Well, they lost, Jordan Addison or Biletnikoff winner to USC. Fight on, go Trojans, am I right? But this is the team that lost a lot of talent. Pat Narduzzi, and the ACC is just better this year in terms of overall depth. You got Clemson, Syracuse, Wake Forest, Florida State, NC State, all in the Atlantic Division, all teams that are really, really talented. The Coastal's been a bit down, but UNC is pretty good in there too. It's just a better conference this year, and Pitt struggled against it.
They really have. I mean, the last 2 weeks have shown you. UNC ran through Pitt, and the week before, they got stunned by Louisville. But you mentioned how strong the conference is. Louisville looks like they're back. On any given week in the ACC, you don't know what's going to happen.
Louisville looks like they're back. Syracuse beat them, remember that, folks. But Pitt football, it starts at the top, and that's with head coach Pat Narduzzi. Hired in 2014, the former Cincinnati and Michigan State D coordinator has had some ups and downs with the Panthers. Narduzzi has won the Coastal Division twice and the ACC Championship just last year. But Ian, the head man hasn't had much success this year.
No, he hasn't been, but there's a reason why Narduzzi is under contract till 2030. He has changed the expectations of his Pitt program year in and year out. A 57-41 record, 8 wins in 4 of those seasons. He's built a winning culture in the Steel City.
Yeah, only 1 losing season since he entered the program. He's just done a really, really good job developing talent and keeping this Pitt team consistent for many years on end.
One of those players he's really helped develop, that was Kenny Pickett, but he left for the NFL, so Pitt went to the transfer portal and picked up Kedon Slovis from USC. He hasn't really had that great of a year, though, after last year posting over 2,000 passing yards. So, Ethan, this year, not really the same on-field impact that Pickett had.
No, it seems like USC, it's coming and going when it comes to Pittsburgh. The Trojans infiltrating this Panthers program, but Slovis, he's really struggled at times this season. Ever since he got hurt in the beginning of the year, this is a Pitt team that gave Tennessee, the #1 team in the country, a run for its money. Now, this is a team that's losing to Georgia Tech, to Louisville. It's been a real turn of the tides for Slovis.
Guess how many fourth quarter points Pitt scored against Louisville and UNC? A big fat 0. This offense is hurting because of Kedon Slovis's play. They didn't even move the ball past midfield in the fourth quarter against the Tar Heels. That is unacceptable.
You guys are really passionate about Kedon Slovis' performing, and he has been underperforming, but the run game led by Israel Abanikanda has been on fire. The Brooklyn native is 3rd in the country in rushing yards with just over 1,000. Oh, and the junior also has 16 touchdowns. That mark leads the FBS. So Ian, Pitt in 2022, it's the Israel Abanikanda show.
When you score 6 touchdowns in one game, I would say you're not just the whole show, you're like a video game-like player. Israel Abanikanda has everything you want in a running back. Speed, vision, and he explodes through the tackles. And nobody knew who he was heading into this season because his own head coach, Narduzzi, said, you know, our own offensive coordinator didn't know how to use him. They know how to use him now, and Syracuse is going to feel out, you know, have that impact on Saturday.
Yeah, well, Israel's my favorite country except for the United States, so how can you not love this guy? He's got a great name and he's got a great playing style on the field. He's going to be really tough for SU to handle.
Wow, Ethan, what a great country, what a great name. I couldn't be more behind you on that. But we've talked about the offense. Now we flip to the defense. Pitt is in the bottom 5 in the conference in scoring defense, but has 6 total interceptions and 2 defensive touchdowns. So, Ian, what should Syracuse fans know about this Panthers secondary?
Well, Ben, Pitt's coming off its worst defensive performance of the season against North Carolina. The Panthers' secondary was shredded for nearly 400 yards and 5 scores. Jim Thorpe Award semifinalist Eric Hallett got burned and allowed 2 touchdowns. Usually, Hallett's one of the top slot defenders in the nation. Last year's ACC championship game MVP has 3 picks and 2 fumble recoveries. Regardless, SU play caller Robert Anae should be licking his chops. The redshirt senior tends to struggle against RPO offenses. Overall, Pittsburgh runs almost exclusively cover 4. Pat Narduzzi's defense is designed to limit big plays, but it also leaves his DBs vulnerable. If the Orange can pass protect for whoever is starting under center, they'll have ample opportunities to pounce on the Panthers.
Well, Ian, many opportunities indeed, but we're going to take another quick break here on Cuse Countdown. On the other side, Ethan and Ian will have to make some difficult decisions. You won't want to miss it. CC, back in 90 seconds.
They call me Maxie, but I prefer tripod. I was your above-average 4-legged homie, and then wham, bam, minivan. Some people pity me. Now that's lame. I still run, fetch, and swim. And the ladies love me. I'm the ultimate wingman. Just don't ask me to high five.
Welcome back to Cuse Countdown. Ethan Frank, Ian Nicholas, and Ben Spector with you. And guys, we're on an island to play Would You Rather. So we're really putting your minds to the test. But we start with the running back position. Last year, Sean Tucker led the ACC in rushing yards with nearly 1,500. But this year, through 8 weeks, it has been the Israel Abanikanda show. We talked about the running backs earlier in the show, but Ethan, would you rather have the 2021 Sean Tucker or the 2022 Israel Abanikanda?
Well, Ben, I profused my love for Israel Abanikanda earlier in the show. I'm going to continue that. Did you know he had a game this season when he ran for 320 yards and 6 touchdowns? Sean Tucker could never do that. Speaking of which, Israel Abanikanda through 8 games, 3 games already this season with 3 or more touchdowns. Sean Tucker didn't come close to that last season, only one of those, and that was against UAlbany. Abanikanda hasn't beat in the stats category, he hasn't beat in the swag category too.
That was a good UAlbany team. Jared Verse was on that team. What about that Ohio team?
Name another player on the team besides Jared Verse.
The quarterback was okay. But Sean Tucker didn't just get it done against FCS talent in 2021. Against the FBS, he single-handedly kept Syracuse in the Clemson game and single-handedly kept them in the Wake Forest game. They didn't win either of those games because despite an inability to throw the ball and an awful offensive line, Sean Tucker was still the best running back in the country, and he's just a more marketable guy. People know who he is. Nobody knew who Abanikanda was heading into this year.
If Sean Tucker didn't tweet, nobody would know who he was.
But now they know who Abanikanda is, right? And Sean Tucker didn't win them those games. Also, Ethan, the swag factor, really a big deal. So thank you so much for bringing that up. But we focused on the running backs. We focused on the current, a little bit in the recent past. So let's turn to the future, right? The Orange are having an improbable season this year, 6-2, while the Panthers aren't living up to the expectations it set from last year. So when you look at the two programs, Ian, would you rather invest in the future of SU or the future of Pitt?
I'm investing in the future that Ethan Frank told me about. You said it yourself. Syracuse can't recruit, and Pitt can. A top 40 recruiting class for Pitt next year, and for Syracuse, 90th. Nobody wants to come up to the freezing tundra. Everybody wants to go play for Narduzzi. He's been there for years. He's built a winning program. The consistency is key for the Panthers.
You know, you took the words right out of my mouth, but guess what? I am still high on Syracuse despite the recruiting woes. You know why? Because this team is going to have a lot of returners next year. They're developing a new football facility that will help market themselves to recruits, to the current players. Who needs more weight room? Syracuse does. Get those guys beefed up on the offensive and defensive line.
For sure.
I like Syracuse's future. The continuity from this year to next year and into the future will be there.
Ethan, they don't have a 5-star recruit. I said it earlier in the show, Syracuse. How could you invest in something where you don't really know what you're getting? Lots of risks there. But all right. I'm going to do my best Picasso impression, all right? Let me paint you a picture here. 3 minutes left in the game. Down by 3 points. You need to win. Ethan, Dino Babers as your head coach or Pat Narduzzi? Who do you trust more?
I'm going to pick Pat Narduzzi because I can't stand Dino Babers when he is down by 3 with the ball with 3 minutes to go. Did you watch any Syracuse football last season? How about the game against Clemson this year? Dino lets 25 seconds run off the clock, then calls a timeout, then almost gets his quarterback killed in the first play of the next possession with bad pass protection. And how about last season? 3 straight games the Orange lost by 3 points or less, all because of bad coaching decisions by Babers. Just by default, Narduzzi wins this because of Babers' failures.
Ethan, have you been sleeping under a rock this past year? Do you remember the Purdue game? Do you remember the Virginia game? Game-winning drives. Dino Babers had to have some influence in that, right? Or are you just going to credit all of it to Robert and I?
Purdue lost that game. Syracuse did not win it.
Really? It's a wins and loss business, and Babers picked up 2 wins where both of them ended with game-winning drives.
Now, Ian, what if the game was in November for Dino Babers?
We talked about that earlier.
What is it?
It's a loss.
Oh, there it is. There it is. You backtracked. That's okay, though. But we're up against one final break. We'll give you who we predict to win this Saturday. On the other side, don't go anywhere. It's Cuse Countdown.
Here's to the straggly ones. The first ones. Hey, I look good with this ones. The black, brown, red, and gray ones. The itchy ones. The ones grown by Dad. The ones grown for Dad. The I nearly didn't do it this year ones. And the absolutely filthy ones. They all raise awareness, raise funds, start conversations, and save lives. Because whatever you grow will save a bro. Learn more at Movember.
Closing up shop here on Cuse Countdown with Ethan Frank and Ian Nicholas, I'm Ben Spector. Thank you so much for joining us. But before we give you our predictions for this weekend's matchup, it's important to note it's an old Big East rivalry this weekend. The Orange and the Panthers have met multiple times, but 2016 featured one of the highest scoring affairs in college football history. Pitt took this one 76-61, and Ethan, the ball was flying.
It was an incredible game to watch, Ben. I remember sitting on my couch watching this game. It was really, really fun. Just two teams going back and forth throwing the football. But you look at the history of this matchup. Pitt leads the all-time series 42-31-3. 3 ties. That's actually kind of wild. But the Panthers have dominated a little bit, going back to the Big East days when Pitt joined the Big East in 1982. Syracuse, a founding member of the conference, a couple years earlier. And the Orange really dominated in the 80s and 90s, won every single matchup except 2, from 1984 to 2001. But in the 21st century, it's really been in favor of the Panthers.
Oh yeah, I've got even more numbers for you. Since 2002, Syracuse has beaten Pitt just twice, and they play every single year. But here's the stat you didn't mention. Syracuse's lack of success on the road. 0-3 in the Babers era at Heinz Field. Now it's Acrisure Stadium. It doesn't matter what the name is. It's probably going to be bad juju for Syracuse.
Bad juju for Syracuse. You brought the numbers and then you say something like that. But Ethan, do you also think it's going to be bad juju for Syracuse? What do you have, who do you have winning this one?
Well, if you watch this entire show, you know I don't like agreeing with Ian. I'm going to have to agree with Ian, and it really pains me to do so. I've got the Panthers 31-21 because of Israel Abanikanda. He's going to torch this Syracuse undersized defensive line, run right through it, right past the linebackers. I could see a 200-plus yard day from Abanikanda and a Panthers win.
This, folks, is a negative Nancy, but I will somewhat agree with you. It's going to stay close. Syracuse will cover. It's going to be a great game. Whoever's under center is going to have an opportunity against a bad Pitt defense. But Abanikanda, against a really tough, really injured defensive line, is going to feast. 27-24, Panthers back over 500. Syracuse 3 straight losses.
It took until the end of the show for you two to agree? That's crazy. I don't agree with the two of you. Syracuse 24-21. The Orange win in the Steel City for the first time since 2001. Enough is enough for this Orange team. They go into Pittsburgh and win. But that's all the time we have here on Cuse Countdown. From Ethan Frank, Ian Nicholas, I'm Ben Spector saying so long and enjoy the game this Saturday.